I'm going to resume recording of the webinar. So this webinar is being recorded. So we will make the slides and the recording available. It takes sometimes a couple hours to get the link to the recording. Okay, so I show us at 11 o'clock. My name is Steve Wallace. I'm with Internet 2. Thanks everyone for attending, and very much thanks to Merit for agreeing to give us a refresher course for some, and maybe the first course for others in how to use RADb. We've received a number of questions from the community concerning the changes we're hearing from Google, and several folks have said, well, exactly what have they said and when and where? I think Jeff Barteg was good enough to put together most of this list of references. So it's my understanding, based on the information I've seen, is that they have started to put technology and systems in place to kind of look at the state of routing and the disconnect between the routes they're seeing and what may be well documented in the IRR. And they have stated not that long ago that starting in September, they'll start to filter routes based on if they're not represented correctly in an IRR. But here are the first link, the first quote actually comes from their peering page. And so you can see basically they're calling Q2, they're applying the filters, but a presentation they gave, RIPE 78, is more specific, and these links are actually pretty useful generally to see what they're doing. So we'll distribute this with the slides, so everyone will have a copy, and we just want to give you a sense of when we say we're hearing from Google, what do we mean? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and that just wickedly changed everything. Hang on. Okay, so I think whoever wants to do the screen share for Merit, you should be able to.
Okay, we're switching over right now. Mitchell, do you mind going over to the slide deck? Great. Can everyone hear me? Or Steve, can you verify you can hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Great, very, very good. So good morning, everyone. I'm David Dennis, Executive Director of Product Management here at Merit, and with me today is Mitchell Cook. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Mitchell Cook, I'm the RADb Product Manager. Been trying to, well, that's it.
And just over my shoulder, hanging out with us today is Larry Blanc. Many of you know Larry. He's been with Merit for many years. He's one of our senior network engineers and also active in the RADb community. So next slide. So what we have in mind for today, we're going to do a quick review. Some of this is a quick refresher from our July presentation, just to talk about high points. What is the IRR? What is the Merit RADb? What's the importance of IRR? And then we're really going to jump into the meat of today's presentation, which is a demo of some of the high points of how, what are the best ways to register your objects within IRR via RADb? What's the best way to set up and optimize your account, and a number of other things that will hopefully be helpful to the network operators out there as you participate in these IRRs. And then if we have time left over, we'd like to just give a quick overview of some of the recent developments on RADb and some of the future roadmap plans that we have, and certainly get your input on those things. And then we can wrap up with some Q&A. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Mitchell to talk about some of the IRR concepts.
The Internet Route Registry is a loosely federated system to database and share network routing policy written in the route policy specification language. RPSL is a open standard to defining network policy in both a human and machine readable format. It's queryable on demand and available in bulk form. It was developed specifically for IP networks and BGP autonomous systems. It doesn't scale to internal networks or otherwise. And each database entry is publicly available and written in the RPSL format. We call those objects. Each database entry is an object. There's a handful of standards available linked on the website irr.net. RADb is a...
So if I could interrupt for 1 second, a couple of people are reporting that the audio is a little bit muddy, and I don't know if that's anything that you can do, if you can position yourself closer to the mic. I don't know if you guys are using a room mic or something. That might be helpful.
Sure, I'll make an attempt. I don't know if that's any better.
Yeah, I think so, hopefully. It's funny, about half the people are saying the audio is great and the other are saying it's a little muddy. So, yeah.
Right, we'll try to speak up and enunciate.
Okay, thanks.
So the Internet Routing Registry as a whole is several publicly available routing registries, of which RADb is one. There is a federation and mirroring across IRR implementations. RADb started in 1994 with the purpose of being publicly queryable and becoming the de facto query source for IRR data. We mirror many of the community trusted IRRs and encourage others to mirror our data set as well. The goal of participating in the Internet Route Registry is to enable more stable and consistent global routing. At the core of that is providing a publication and query method for prefix and origin matching. Can dive into deeper peering policies to define your neighbors. Ultimately allowing network operators to publish their routing configuration policy publicly and ultimately filtering BGP announcements from neighbors. We've extended RADb to include a public website for registering and maintaining your account, and that's what we're going to dive into today. For those who haven't yet registered for RADb and signed up for an account, there will be a register link when you visit our website in the top right-hand corner. So when visiting www.radb.net, you can kick off signing up for a new account by clicking register at the top. It's one account per organization. If your organization already has an RADb account, you'll want to grab access from your current administrators. Start off with a little bit of personal information about the user. Pretty standard directory information, email address, first, last name, and your ARIN NIC handle if you have one. Does require a unique email address. If you've previously registered for RADb, we'll have to work through our support process to gain access. If you have a NIC handle, here's an excellent opportunity to provide it, although it can be left blank. For those who don't know, the NIC handles are generated over at ARIN. and include public contact information for yourself. We have a very simple terms of service that you're agreeing to for your organization. We move forward with the form. Again, standard directory information. Same NIC handle. If you have one, this is an excellent opportunity to provide it. If not, it's fair to leave it blank. And then the meat of setting up your account starts here with your primary AS number. If your organization holds and routes with more than one AS number, that's not a problem. Our RADb scales just fine. But the one that you'd consider your go-to is what you provide here. This can always be changed later if there's a need. Same with mailing address. And a few questions about how you found us. Move on to building your first object. Your first object is your maintainer object. The maintainer object becomes your database user. This will hold the information about, the programmatic information about how you and your team interact with RADb. Providing a, we usually follow the maintainer standard, naming standard, your username standard as maint-AS and your primary AS number. If you have a need to change that to an organization name, now's the time to do it. There's not an opportunity to back out later. If you operate a simple network with a single AS number, following the standard naming convention is easiest. Again, here's an opportunity for NIC handles for your organization or your organization's role account. And then the system will generate automatic emails as you update and maintain your objects. So this would be a great opportunity for a team email address, tech ops or otherwise. You get an opportunity to review the directory information you provided, including your billing address, followed by your database user, the maintainer object, which is below. When you click submit, you'll receive an email with some login information your first time, with some hand waving. I'll move over to Merit's account since I'm already logged in.
So there was a question in the chat about why we're using a demo website and it's not SSL secured, and we just thought it best to use our demo website for these purposes today. Obviously, everything that Mitchell's demonstrating is available through the production website at radb.net.
Once you're logged into the RADb, I've switched to the demo account we've just created. I've skipped the authentication and user registration and password setting routine. You'll be presented with a getting started banner across the top. This will walk new accounts and existing accounts through some of the key features and some of the key requirements for building entries in the database. The first step that we'll run across is adding authorized contacts. These are folks who will receive billing notifications, are able to log in to the RADb website, and request support from our team at support@radb.net. These would also include API users. The setup is pretty straightforward. As you fill out a new form for new users, they'll be emailed with a notification that they now have access to log into RADb. Standard password token, click here to set a password is included in that email. Great opportunity to list a NOC or a team email address going forward. Move back to our Getting Started interface. We'll verify the billing address. This is what will print on the annual RADb renewal notice. And then for each of the users you added, we'll list whether they have set a web login password or not. You'll have an opportunity to send them a password reminder to set up their account. Now we talked about how we needed to build an RADb database user. The database user is organizational wide and shared by everyone who logs into the RADb website or otherwise interacts with RADb. It would be equivalent to an enabled password on a Cisco box. After you log into the website and begin interacting, as you make database changes, you'll need to provide your authorized maintainer password. On your first several visits to RADb, you're able to set your maintainer password without an existing one. This is only available to brand new accounts. Here we're going to provide the plain text version of the password. This is the thing that you'll want to type every time. We'll build your updated database user for you, and you'll see that we have hashed the plain text password and committed that to the database. So the provided commit password is now going to be demo 2019. The website has hashed it for you, and we're going to write that into the database, and it'll create your database user. If you're in a position where you don't want to share a database password across multiple users, any one database password can add a new one. So here, we'll create a second password. The website will hash the database entry for you, the existing hash and the new hash, and then it prompts for the existing password. Now there's several commit passwords available to your account. The tricky part to remember here is that your website username and password belongs to you individually, and then the database auth is a completely separate record. So we can return to getting started. We'll work through our list. We can leave ourselves a note, mark that we have completed that step and we don't need to return to it. And then we present to you the entirety of your database user. The database username, and your password hashes are the key elements here. If the email address you want system-generated notices to go to change, here's your opportunity. And this is the core of the RADb website. As you're navigating around, we'll present each of your database entries broken out by entry type on the left. And they'll be presented a web form to edit. Here, if I decided that this is too much or noise for the NOC address and I want to change it back to myself, I'm presented that opportunity. Move through the web form. The database change is presented, and I'm asked for my commit password. Receive back positive confirmation that the object is written. We can expand and view that object. Those are largely the tricky parts about interacting with our website compared to many others. Really bridges the gap between the underlying database and the user. Returning to getting started, and we start to get to the exciting parts. Start working on building our network policy. When we arrive, we'll note that we don't yet have an auth-num. The auth-num object is a declaration that your autonomous system is managed in RADb. It can be expanded to include import and export information about who your neighbors are. The important part about creating an auth-num object is it lets us name scope other database objects later. It's worth touching on that when we created our maintainer object, automatically we chose the naming convention mate dash and AS number. This is the name of your database user and not necessarily a declaration that you manage this AS number in RADb. There's almost always a one-to-one relationship to that, but you'll have steps beyond just creating the maintainer object. That first step is the auth-num object. Here we'll keep our demo going with demo ASNs. We'll provide a brief name. Description. If you want more specific contact information, you're given that opportunity. Same with notify. And we'll come back to routing policy in a minute. System generates the database entry, and we're presented our opportunity to enter our commit password. I skipped a field. Here RADb is suggesting that I need to provide admin and tech contact information. This can be in the form of a nick handle or a name. On the left-hand side, there are plus buttons that allow you to define multiple entries. If as a user I wanted to present both my nick handle and my name, I can add a second description. It's not available for all fields. You'll notice primary keys like autonum don't have that plus or AS name, while other fields such as admin contact name and text contact name do provide that plus. Again, we'll preview the database object we're about to build, type our commit password, and save. We'll return to our active autonum objects. This is all of the autonums related to this account. The first section, active autonoms, are those that are directly maintained by the account we're logged into. And related autonoms are objects for those of our neighbors that are also entered into the RADb. Here you can see the output of the object we just made in the web interface. We'll return to getting started, and we'll create our route objects. Route objects at their core are incredibly simple. They're designed to be a linkage for prefix and origin matching. We can include some routing policy, but it's pretty rare to do so, particularly when you're first setting up an RADb account. Same opportunity to provide per route contact information. Make a typo. The memo at the top didn't really scale well to the Zoom meeting. Every time that there's a return message, we provide the full database output, so you can see what is system generated. The update that we just attempted failed. There is a reason, there is a syntax error. The website then parses that message and attempts to print the error underneath where the mistake was made. Correct the mistake, return, and commit. Our committed object is then presented in the web interface. The IRR faces a bit of a discovery problem. After you create route and origin matching, understanding who a network is and what their peers look like is defined in an AS set object. It's best practice to create an AS set, defining yourself and your peers, your neighbors, your downstream customers specifically, those of which you're going to transit traffic for, and publish that AS set name in your autonum object and on PeerDB. When choosing an AS set name, you'll want to scope your name to your account in your autonum object. It's possible to create a AS set name without a scope, but it would be better practice to scope your AS set. So keeping with our demo 64507, we can create our AS set. There isn't a standard convention for naming. Merit's picked AS Mishnet. I've been personally happy with Cone, a name that I've borrowed from the RPKI implementations. In practice, your AS set can list yourself as a member, followed by another AS set. And that's what we're going to do in our demo as well. List ourselves. Followed by an AS set that will include all of our downstreams. Opportunity to include contact information. We've now got a recursive AS set that lists ourselves and another AS set. Since this does not yet exist, we'll go ahead and create it.
Is it just a comma-separated list of AS numbers in that format?
It is. At the creation of our top level named AS, we'll head over to PeeringDB and update our primary AS listed. So in our example, our demo example, we list AS 64507 : AS-cone. We'll return to our Putnam object and update the most basic of policies, setting an import and export field. Import and export can become quite complex. The most basic format would be to declare your customer object, accept pure AS, and vice versa. We'll keep our simple example. From our customer AS set, and correct tooling will do the expansion here. We'll be provided an update of the change. Commit. this point, we have a very basic and fully set up and functional RADb and IRR account. The next steps are quite simple, and it would be to return to your route and Route 6 sections and add prefix origin pairs. We'll take an opportunity to go look at Merritt's account. Return to getting started at any time. See our list of current contacts, billing address, login instructions. Here you'll see that 3 of our users have logged into the website before, 2 have not. Then we move on to maintainer authorization, and I'm actually going to stop here to avoid sharing our password hash. Moving over to the objects menu, each of our AS sets is available for view and editing. Here you'll see our top level AS set is named AS-Mishnet, which is in line with what we publish on PeeringDB. Publish an auth-num object for ourselves. We maintain our default import and export lines, our downstream networks, and their AS set for expansion. Routes, maintain each route that we might possibly announce with their prefix and origin pair. Merit example, prefix and origin pair. The exciting part about having an account all set up is we, within a very few minutes, a very quick few minutes, that information becomes public and queryable. There's a couple interfaces for it. The most simple interface is at ftp.radb.net. which returns periodic dumps of the entire database. The most common and most useful interface is over on our Whois service. Which is available at whois.radb.net. When making a basic search, we do a little bit of fuzzy matching to guess what what the user is after. Not necessarily acceptable to make programmatic queries without parameters. We searched for Merit's maintainer object. Of note, the password hashes were removed before they're served to the public. And we get to see our database account. We can move on to our auth-num. that we edited on the website. And then we can get into complex queries that are available programmatically. The exciting part about this is it lets our neighbors and peers build their router configurations and prefix lists automatically. We can programmatically ask for the autonum objects that we created. Return the same value, but there's no ambiguity in what I've requested. We can make the same type of search for an AS set. And then it starts to get exciting. We can start to use the tools available to us to do expansions. So we can expand just the data we care about for the AS MishNet object, which would include AS237 in our customers, and programmatically we could complete the recursion. And then make queries to get a list of all prefixes for a network. Typo. The same being available for IPv6. All of this is also available on our API. Our API is only for logged in and authenticated users. It's a Rust-built API. The docs are at api.radb.net/doc. The rest of the world is relegated to the whois service. The tooling around all of this is quite extensive, the most popular tool being BGP-Q3. With BGP-Q3, you can build prefix lists to consume data out of RADb. Here we're going to build a prefix list for a Juniper router named Merit from the AS-MishNet AS set object that we sourced from PeeringDB. Prints out the list of each prefix that should be generated as expected. Each network can recursively do this for each of their peers and downstreams and neighbors. As a whole, I'm probably running out of time. I think we have a few quick moment for questions now, or do we want to?
So I think if you have access to the chat, you might scroll through the chat. There are a number of questions, some of which were answered, and if they were answered by me, perhaps incorrectly. So there might be some. If that's accessible to you, you might scroll through there and see if you see something. And then the other thought I had is I will try to set up another webinar, which is just a question and answer webinar.
Yeah, that all sounds very good. I'm going to take a moment to read through the chat, although I don't know how much I'll get into in a short period of time, and I'll pass the screen over to David.
Yeah, in the meantime, if folks also want to just unmute and ask their questions, that's also fine. But I'm going to, while Mitchell triages those questions, going to touch on a few other things. So some of the work we've done in the past year, just wanted to highlight. So we've really put a new emphasis on development of the RADb. Just in the last year, we've launched a new web platform. We've done a lot of work on the infrastructure side to hopefully improve performance across the board. We've put a lot of investment into our API documentation and other help documentation. And we worked with our internal research team to do a pretty extensive project to sort of quantify the completeness and the accuracy of the RADb and benchmark against other IRRs out there. So we're in the midst of phase 2. We've got a number of rolling releases going out with different features for route recommendations and things of that nature. One of the things we're most excited about right now is we've looked at all the scale objects in the RADb. We understand that while data accuracy is a community concern and responsibility, we want to do more to highlight when we think there is a issue with data accuracy or staleness. So working with our research team, we've developed this prefix origin match scoring system to look at things in the RADb that are suspected scale or problematic, and based on age and other factors, we're going to highlight those things to the maintainers. And eventually this is going to inform policy when we see things that are problematic. This will give us a basis to go in and address those things. So beyond that, things that we're also working on longer term, we'd like to implement some BGP monitoring features to the software. We're looking at what's possible through CADA and Artemis right now and how we can apply that to the RADb. And all the things that Mitchell just demonstrated as far as setting up accounts and getting your objects in place. We'd like to do a lot more to make it easier for networks to operationally include RADb in what they're doing. So that could be any number of things, router configs, et cetera. And as I know that Internet 2 has an interest in moving the network tools and automation state-of-the-art forward, we would certainly be interested in participating as we can make those things work better with IRRs. So we can transition into the Q&A, but if folks have ideas about other features that would be useful, we'd certainly like to hear that. We've also are looking to convene a customer advisory board in the near future. So if there are folks here that would like to be on our customer advisory board offline, we would love to hear from you. But Mitchell, going through the chat, were there any questions that stood out to you?
I actually had trouble parsing the chat log, unfortunately. My peer Larry has jumped in on most of the significant questions, so I think with the few minutes we have left, I think that unmute, if anybody's got a pressing question, would be the easiest way to tackle the conversations. Otherwise, we're available at RADb at merit.edu if anybody wants to ask a question offline. And we're also participating in the Internet 2 IRR working group. If it's a public question.
So one more logistic announcement. Just a reminder, we've recorded the webinar and we're going to share the recording and the slides and the chat log with the attendees. So that'll be available, and we will follow up to schedule just a question and answer webinar. And I will remute so other people can unmute and ask questions.
Thanks, Dave.
I didn't see an answer to this, but I wanted to ask, is the definition of the import and export policy something that's required by that September timeframe, or is that optional like I saw on that slide deck earlier?
There's very little downside to creating the simple import and export policy, the all-to-any to cover your basis until you make a more specific policy. Unfortunately, we don't know how other networks will consume the RADb data. So all we can do is promote best practices. In most cases, it probably won't be a problem to leave it empty. We see most networks take their queuing and discovery from PeeringDB.
Okay, and once, say, the auth-num and the route objects are instantiated, do we use a tool like the IR Explorer to validate that it's all green?
Yep,
or do you have another tool in mind?
is a great resource. And if you want to, I've also seen bgp.he.net be used as a third-party resource. I prefer using tools like BGP-Q3 to consume the RADb data and see how my router would interpret the data set.
So we have a question in the chat window, which I think will be a common question for many. We have a downstream that wouldn't want to go through all of this. Is it possible for us to include their announcements in our RADb records? Is this possible, permissible? And Jeff answered it. So I have a sort of a more generalized version of this question. So if Internet 2, so let's assume Google's going to do their thing on in September and start filtering. If Internet 2 were to proxy register the prefixes, in other words, create route objects for prefixes where there isn't a valid route object in an IRR today, to prevent Google from all of a sudden filtering traffic that's exchanged with Internet 2's I2PX, formerly known as the TRCPS service. Is that sort of a standard practice of a network? I know Internet 2 is not really a full transit provider, but it is a transit provider. From Merit's perspective, is that typically done where in the hierarchy, a higher level network operator will proxy register, and do you see downsides to that?
Where it's permissible, where it's most common is with downstream customers who are single homed, or their other peer networks are private and provide no transit services. There's some risk for the upstream provider, some risk that they're creating for their customers or their downstreams. Typically, there are other networks that consume RADb data that don't publish their IRR consumption policy. And they might choose to, if there's, to follow a chain of rules, something like along the lines of, if there's no IRR objects, allow the route to transit, allow the route to propagate. If there is one or more IRR rules for the given prefix, then it must match that rules, otherwise the route is dropped. And in the case of our networks, our prefixes might be inclusive of other ASN numbers. This is generally unique to RNE networks, but happens elsewhere. For example, if there's a possibility of a single prefix being origined from multiple AS numbers, it's very possible that a network will only trust the data that's in the IRRs. So if your downstream customer normally announces their prefix as themselves, and there's only an RADb object that you created for them, and then they have a sudden need to change origin ASN, say to a cloud DDoS provider, that additional route might get dropped because a matching IRR object doesn't exist. Where before, because there was no IRR objects, those routes might have kind of fallen through to an acceptable route. We're seeing this type of policy getting reversed, where networks must have a valid IRR object, otherwise the route gets dropped. So the best practice really is for every individual customer to maintain an RADb account, every individual ASN to maintain an RADb account for each of their registered prefix that they might announce or another ASN might announce. When you go down the process of proxy registering objects, you're only aware of one relationship for that route object, that route, and there may be others.
Oh, so let me recap what I think I heard you say. One potential hazard of proxy registering is if we created a route object that said a prefix had a particular origin AS, and maybe that prefix originated from multiple origin ASs, which is a little rare but not impossible. The fact that we have created an object for one may create a change in interpretation from there's no records for this, so some networks are going to permit it, period. Oh, there is a record, we're going to ensure that we're seeing it from a valid AS.
Correct. That was perfect summary.
Thanks.
Multiple AS numbers are for a given prefix are surprisingly more common than you'd think. Where we see this happen most often is with cloud DDoS scrubbing services, who will temporarily announce a more specific or announce your route for you and then tunnel traffic back to you out of band. So anybody who's taking advantage of cloud DDoS scrubbing would be in this condition. And they might not know it until there's trouble.
Okay, time for one more question.
Can you restate that again about the cloud DDoS scrubbing implication?
Yeah, yep. There are cloud DDoS scrubbing services that will...
Yes. So if you're using one, what do you need to do differently? That's what I'm missing.
Yep, you need to maintain a route object for both yourself and your ASN, and a route object for that same prefix and their origin ASN.
And that's only for DDoS scrubbing providers that will re-announce your address space using their ASN.
Correct.
Some DDoS providers will make the announcement using your own ASN, and then you do not need a separate route object.
That's right. It's very typical that they will proxy register the object for you. And in that case, you'll likely see it in the related objects section of RADb.
So this has been really good. I'll repeat again. We're gonna share the recording slides, the chat log, and we will schedule a Q&A webinar around this subject in the pretty near future and get the word out to everyone. I appreciate everyone attending. The Merit folks, this is really good. It's nice and dense, and so I think the recording is going to be useful for people to actually step through this the first time, or maybe, since a long time ago. So that's fantastic. And we had, good attendance, good questions, and so hopefully this was valuable. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Save the chat. Stop the recording.